he was nearly on the verge of gagging. And he ran outside the cage and he was about to throw up. And somebody shouted, "Not on the blue screen."
So I think without any further ado, we should bring out our guest of honor. He is the one and only Kevin McNally. What's up, Kevin?
Hi there.
Hi. Or Kevin R Mcnally, as we should say.
I have to tell you, this is a terrible thing to happen just as it starts, but
sure.
For some reason, you're both sounding like frogs.
Oh, okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have you log off and then just log back into the same link that we sent you.
That. And you show the intro video.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. We'll see you momentarily. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was our stream. We hope that you enjoyed it. Who doesn't love a good frog? It ain't easy being green or yellow or whatever the situation may be. Hey, that's fine. That's fine. So, all right. Did we fix the lighting?
I think maybe.
Okay, great. And hopefully we're going to get the voice fixed too. And if you guys are just tuning in, Kevin's going to be joining us momentarily. We sounded like small frogs to him, so we are fixing that. So I guess we should tell you guys that are tuning in right now. Oh, looks like he's joining us again. Do we still sound like frogs? Ribbit, ribbit? Still.
You still sound like a croaking frog.
Oh,
weird.
Okay, how about this?
That's just her voice.
I'm gonna exit, and I'm gonna try to.
Danica, you're all right.
Okay, I'll be back.
You be back.
We'll try this one more time.
Okay. Well, it wouldn't be the internet without glitches, would it?
Well, exactly. Yeah, it's all the wonderful things we're learning to deal with in this grand new era. Just so much fun. Well, we're again very, very pleased to have you with us. And so, what are you drinking tonight?
Huh?
What are you drinking?
I'm drinking a nice glass of rosé wine.
Oh, lovely.
All right, how do I sound now? Better?
Terrible.
Still, okay. Let me try to.
It sounds. I said I'll do an impression of what you sound like.
Okay, do it.
Whoa.
So I sound like.
I think you need your technical dude back.
Let's try this. Do I still sound froggy?
And she sounds fine to me, so that's weird.
I know, that's just really strange, isn't it?
I'll have to do it all in sign language from what I remember. Am I better?
Perfect.
Oh, good. We did it. Fantastic. All right. Well, now that we figured out the technical, listen, this is live streams. This is what happens,
Exactly.
All right, Danica, why don't you take it away?
Right. Let's kick it off. So we got to start because I am by day a theater director, so I got to do my nerdy theater stuff first. So let's get that started. So most Shakespearean actors would dream of the opportunity to get to perform on Shakespeare's Globe stage. So what was that like for you, being able to have that opportunity as King Lear?
Well, it was great. I mean, I wasn't really thinking about playing that role, and I haven't played too many Shakespearean roles. In fact, professionally, I've only played two. I played Claudius in Hamlet on Broadway, and I was offered King Lear, and I thought, oh God, that's really terrifying. But if I'm offered it, I've got to do it. I'd just be a coward not to. But when I got there, they had a policy, because it's as Shakespeare described it, it's a wooden O. So it's made of wood. It has no acoustics whatsoever. It's a very, very hard theatre to play. And so they'd introduced a new policy. They were introducing lighting and things like that they'd never had before in the evening shows. So that it was actually a way to get people to go twice. So you could see it in an Elizabethan way in the daylight and in a sort of a more modern way in the evening. But they introduced the idea of microphones, and I thought about it for a while, and I had to put my foot down. I said, I'm not going to play a Shakespearean play being mic'd, because it's all about your energy and your breath and, the sheer chutzpah of it. Well, I think the younger actors were a bit peeved with me for doing that, because it obviously, you just have to really prepare. You have to strengthen your voice, because the chances are, if you don't, you're going to lose your voice within a couple of performances. Yep. But fortunately, everyone worked really hard and it went well. So that was my only concern, really. The great thing about the Globe Theatre, particularly in the more comic sequences of King Lear, like the Mad Scene, is it gave the opportunity to use the people down below, who Mark Rylance famously described as the belly of the theatre rather than the brain of the theatre up there, and almost make it like vaudeville, interacting with them. What was I offence? Adultery. Oh, that's interesting. Getting a nudge from the girlfriend beside him. So, all in all, a cracking experience.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Danica, I think I found a way to ask the question we were talking about before, which was, from everything that we've kind of learned and that I've read, Shakespeare wrote King Lear, allegedly, during a pandemic. So I'm very curious to see what great works of writing we're going to get now during another pandemic. Who's sitting down writing the next brilliant, play?
Well, I think probably 150,000 people are sitting down to write the next novel or play. We might get one or two out of it. So,
Here's hoping.
But yeah, I mean, I think historically the pandemics have, reset society and have, if we want to be positive about it, and have produced some great works. I mean, there's some very interesting stuff you can read about, in particular, the plague era. If you think that, if I'm complaining about having to eat my ribs outside in Chicago, there were no ribs to be had in 1360 or whatever it was. So, we must all remember that this has happened regularly throughout humanity and will continue to do so, particularly as there are more of us.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So I have another Shakespearean question, just because, this
you
sort
keep
of
those Shakespeare questions coming. Right?
We got them.
It tickles my theater brain a little bit. So for people that don't know, I'll give a little bit of context, but I wanted to know your opinion on the birther theory, or the anti-Stratfordian theory that Shakespeare wasn't really the author of his own plays, and that it may have been Edward de Vere, Francis Bacon, Chris Marlowe, William Stanley. What are your thoughts?
Well, funny enough, Mark Rylance, who used to run the theatre, is a great proponent of this, and I don't know exactly who it is who he thinks wrote them. The point is, when you're doing a Shakespeare play, and I first noticed this doing Hamlet some 11 years ago, after a few performances, you get an ear for what isn't what we call Shakespeare. There's a speech by Ophelia's father late on in Act 2, I think, that is almost like doggerel, and you think, well, that's not really up to Shakespeare's standard. So I think there were lots of additions and people doing little rewrites. The point is, the canon of the work we call Shakespeare. Whether it was somebody else or not, I always think, well, whoever it was who wrote them is the person we refer to as Shakespeare. Whether it was somebody else or not is sort of, it wouldn't make any difference to me as an actor if suddenly I found out it was somebody else, of the way I approach the work. I personally think it was Shakespeare, particularly because of the things like he's obsessed with gloves, and Shakespeare's father was a glove maker. There are many things about. I come from Birmingham in England, which is 25 miles from Stratford. There are some things in the way he expresses himself that seem to come from the Midlands of England. It smacks of that area. Wherever you come from in America, you can tell if someone sort of pretty quickly comes from where you are just through the sort of language they use, and not even the accent. So all of the things I notice really add up to it being Shakespeare. And I certainly don't think it was one of the aristocrats. This was a mercantile man. This was what we would call a middle class person who wrote those plays.
I'm with you.
Oh, good. I'm glad we didn't have a row about that.
Not yet.
There's plenty of time and a lot more wine.
I guess like a good follow-up question to that would be, is there any tips or tricks as far as learning how to perform or memorize iambic pentameter?
Well, I wouldn't say tricks, but certainly remembering the iambic beat will help you. If you're ever doing a line and it's not tripping, well, go back and look at the text, because you might be adding something or not. As far as I'm concerned, there's never been an easy way to learn any lines. It's just hard work and repetition. Ultimately, the really good sections of Shakespeare are the easiest to learn. The most difficult to learn are the prose sections, which tend to be the words put into the mouths of the lower classes or the comic parts. Those are the most difficult because you don't have the pentameter to help you get through it. Now, funnily enough, I don't bang on about this too much, but when I was at the Globe, they have a plethora of people, all with expertise in certain areas. And I bumped into quite a few of those. One of them was that they say you should always work through relaxation. And I think there are times when you can work through tension. One of them was always be on top of your breath. And sometimes I think going red as an actor is not a bad thing if you're in extremis, you know. But they were always saying, oh, you're going red, you're not breathing enough. And I would say, well, this is bloody hard work. And the other thing I bumped up against was that there is a little bit at the Globe, and with a lot of Shakespeare scholars, of being very, very strict about always stressing the pentameter. And I don't agree with that at all. The pentameter is a guide that you have to keep abreast of like a metronome. You don't play the piano on the metronome. You use the metronome to keep you going through it, and the pentameter keeps you going through it. And even, you know, from performance to performance, I would try to vary sometimes the stresses because I would find new meaning.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
Fun. So another kind of fun kind of theater question, I guess. And I've talked about this. I have a separate podcast that's the Theater Nerd Podcast, where I interviewed a bunch of different people about theater superstitions. So I'm always curious about what superstitions you've seen and if you follow any of them.
Well, I can only tell one story about this. When I was at drama school, I didn't have, my family had no money, and so I had to get a job in the evening. And I went to a local theatre in the West End to be a lighting technician and to work backstage a little bit, but mainly to work the lights. And I learned how to do that. And it was on a show called O Calcutta, which was famously a nude review written by some very famous people. But it was a very interesting thing for a boy at 17 to do, because I don't think I'd ever seen nude women before. So I would be backstage as often as I possibly could. But I remember the show used to open back in those days. Music was all on reel-to-reel tapes. And I remember the guy who had the first cue was this young lad, and he was setting up his first cue. And he was obviously thinking about the tune, and he was going. And the company manager came over and said, "You cannot whistle backstage," probably for a superstitious reason that you know. And he said, "Go outside the stage door, turn around 3 times, spit, and then come back in again." So he did that. And he came back, and he was late for his cue. And he was furious. He went to the company manager and said, "I went outside and spat and turned around 3 times, and I was late for my cue." He said, "There, you see, it's bad luck to whistle."
Noted. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
good.
yeah.
Good. I didn't know that one. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking, you know, also since we're speaking of Shakespeare and Globe Theatre, I'm wondering how superstitious are when they're performing the Scottish play, especially at the Globe Theatre.
Well, I am not a superstitious person. There are sort of reasons for all these. As you probably know, Danica, the reason for the whistling one is that they used to hire sailors to fly in the ropes because they were good with ropes. And on the high seas, you can't shout at each other, so they would pierce whistle to each other. So it was possible in the 18th century theatre that if you whistled something, you might actually be saying, "Could you drop the really big, heavy piece of wood onto the stage now?" And you'd get hurt. So whistling was the language of the backstage. The Macbeth one, I believe, came about because there were maybe maybe there was at some point a production in which a number of people died and people went crazy over it. It's very similar to what we've had in the 20th century, which is the Superman superstition. You know, George Reeves, Reeves shooting himself, and obviously what happened to poor Christopher Reeve, and you know, Margot Kidder going bonkers, and a few other people attached to the franchise. I think it's just an accumulation of coincidence that makes people wary.
How fascinating!
I see Joseph McBride is watching. Hi, Joseph. How are you? I talk to him quite a lot on. We differ very much politically, but we have a great similar sense of humor, so that's really good.
Well, that's good. It's good on the humor. So I guess another question, not just like with theater, but with any of your roles, you've had the opportunity to do quite a few accents. So what accent to you do you feel has been the most challenging, if any of them have actually been challenging for you?
Well, the ones that are most challenging to me, I've never actually been asked to do, and I try to practice them just in case I ever am. I love doing accents. When I first came to America, I decided that I wanted to have perfect American accents because I didn't want to always be playing either Nazis or Romans, which is what English people were basically asked to do for many years in movies. So I practiced very hard at that. The two accents that are hardest to do from my home country are an accent from the northeast of England called Geordie, and the Welsh accent. They are really, really tough. But given a little bit of, a little bit of time and practice, and certainly with some friends of mine, I know a guy called William Conacher very well, who is the voice coach on The Crown, actually. And he helped me do a lot of work on my accent on The Crown, because the guy I was playing, although it was a small part, had a very distinctive accent, northern accent, and he said some very things like about he had, which isn't normally in that accent. So I had to try to work on those. But you can sort of get anything if you work at it. If you have an ear, and you'll find that you'll know, Danica, that most actors who are good at accents are usually good singers and often play instruments or a musical, and that's because it is about, well, it's about two things. It's about the tonic sound of the accent, but also it's about how well written the part is, and it's written in the argot of the accent. It's no point getting an English text and doing it in a New York accent. It's not going to work. You know, it's got to be written in a New York accent and a New York argot. Yeah.
I think it's so wild, and maybe like we just don't think about it so much in our everyday lives, that you could literally go, 10 miles away and have a completely different accent than 10 miles this way and 10 miles that way. I think when you think British accent, you're like, oh yeah, British accent. But there's hundreds, there's thousands.
There was when the Beatles, who are famously Liverpudlians of Liverpool, and it's a very interesting accent, the Liverpool accent,
That's
hello,
a Scouse
George,
accent.
hello, John.
I love it.
Sort of they were famously introduced. I don't think it was Ed Sullivan. He wouldn't be that stupid, but they were introduced as and now England's Cockney band, the Beatles. Well, they were furious because Cockney is, of course, the accent of London.
It's also the opposite side of the country.
The other side of the country.
So weird.
There's a lovely story about that, actually, because when the Beatles came about, the famous London band. Hello, Nigel Williams. How are you? We were at school together. When the Beatles were getting famous, the band that was their London equivalent was called the Kinks, with Ray Davies, and they were both doing a gig somewhere in the Midlands, and John Lennon got into the or actually Ray Davies got into it, and John Lennon was there, and he knew the Beatles hated the Kinks because they were a southern band, and they stood quietly for a while, and John Lennon said to him, "Are you Ray Davies of the Kinks?" And Ray Davies went, "Yeah, I am." And he said the F word to him, followed by off. And anyway, about 25 to 30 years later, Ray Davies went to New York and hired an apartment in the Dakota building where John Lennon lived. And one day he got into the lift and John Lennon was in the lift, and they stood in silence for a moment. And John Lennon said, "Hello, are you Ray Davies of the Kinks?" And Ray said, "Yeah." And John Lennon said, "Sorry about the other night."
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I love both the Beatles and the Kinks. Fantastic bands. Danica, do you think we should ask Nick's question? I wouldn't want to put you on the spot, but
we can certainly see what happens. So
okay.
Nick happens to be my husband. Wants to know, what is your favorite American accent, and can you demonstrate?
I see it here. I have a lot of favorite American accents, and I've tried a few. I'm very reticent to do them off the bat because I like to work on them. But I would love to be able to work on the accents they have in Fargo, because I find those extraordinarily difficult. But I did. I'll give you an example of what I love about language. I was once in Atlanta doing a convention, and a guy saw me and recognized me, and he came up and he was quite excited, and he said, "I can't believe it's y'all. I just love y'all. Thanks for being y'all." And I went, "What? That's the most bizarre thing I've ever heard." So I remember that as a way of getting into some sort of Southern accent.
Love that. That's so funny.
But I also I would like my next American role to play. I worked for 4 years in Virginia, and I used to love hanging out with the crew, with some really baroque Virginian accents, and a couple of guys were from the West Virginia Panhandle, and their accents are extraordinary. So I'd like to have a go at that. But I started out in theater, doing new American plays. So I started to learn New York accents from the works of Thomas Bay, and I did a couple of David Mamet, so I had to try to get a Chicago accent. And to this day, I don't know what a Chicago accent is. But I tried them. So I've done as many of my. If I may do a little bit more later on, but I because it's very, very difficult when you're British. And people, I tell you, I did in New York. I did an episode of the Good Fight. Mm. And when people know you're English and they hear you do an American accent, they often find fault in it and say that's not very good. So I went in there and I didn't let on I was English, and none of them knew that I had an English accent, and they were really surprised at the end of the day when I spoke, because a lot of it is perception. If somebody says to you that they're English and you think, well, that sounds a bit weird, you think, oh, just they've lived in different places. There are very few pure accents left in the world, I think. Well, in the developed world these days. I find it very hard traveling around this country to know where a woman cut my hair the other day. Been in Chicago, sounded like Chicago. She was from Kentucky. I couldn't tell any Kentucky in her voice,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I would say, we neutralize a lot, but just because of all of the international travel that we do, it's more things are becoming neutral. So we're losing a lot. It's
I think also television has made a massive difference in the last 50 years. Mm-hmm. I know that there are people in England who go around trying to track down old people and record their voices because they're voices that are disappearing. And I would imagine to a lesser extent that's true in America, because you still have so much more of a rural society than we do in England. And rural societies is where the accents tend to remain from generation to generation. Mm-hmm. And a good thing too.
Yeah, I actually have a friend of mine who is an accent coach, one of the big American accent coaches for accenthelp.com. And he is one of those people that travels around the world and records accents, especially the ones that are kind of going away.
Yeah, the ones that we're losing, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's jump to some other stuff. So, so you briefly mentioned the role in The Crown. So I was wondering, besides the accent work, what other kinds of research did you have to do as, Bernard Ingham? And did you get to meet him or any of the other characters that everybody's based on?
No, I wanted to meet Bernard Ingham, but I was assured that he was he's a little old now, and he might have been a bit cranky about somebody playing him. It was unfortunate that in between accepting the role and going there, a lot of the role got decimated, and indeed, because they have so many storylines, I knew this going in. You know, I lost quite a bit of stuff that I really liked. So it really, I mean, I just wanted to be on the show. It was great. And I didn't really have to research Bernard Ingham because I was fascinated by him in the 80s. This left-wing journalist who saw an opportunity to be the spokesperson for one of the most right-wing leaders we ever had, I thought was either a genius or a complete sellout. And he had this bizarre look and bizarre voice, and I thought, well, I would like to do that for a few months. So indeed I did. But I could summon him up easily because I used to love his press conferences. I just found him so we have a word, doesn't mean the same thing in America, but it's so fruity, like a big fruit cake. It's such an enjoyable thing to listen to and to watch. So, and I got also the opportunity of working all the time with the lovely Gillian Anderson, who's just a delight to work with, and I think is extraordinary as Mrs. Thatcher. She's not lionizing her, and she's doing what every actor should do, which is whoever you're playing, you've got to bat their corner. You can't comment on them or make them a goodie or a baddie. You just have to play them as honestly as you can, and I think she's doing that.
And I think we also need to mention how beautiful everything is, from the makeup to the hair to the wardrobe. I mean, the crown is just really nailed it.
Shows.
Absolutely. It's rather interesting. I don't know what it's like in America, but in England, there's real division at the moment of people who either love it or hate it. That sort of defines 2020 at the moment, really, about anything. But, people who think it's wonderful for the reasons you mentioned, Miss Cadet, and also people who hate it because they somehow feel that it's dissing the royal family. There was a ludicrous suggestion by one of our politicians yesterday that they put a disclaimer on the show saying that this is fiction and not fact.
Right.
Well, are you going to go back 120 years of movie and put that disclaimer on every film that's ever been made or every TV show?
Right.
It's so insulting to people's intelligence that I can't bear it.
Yeah. Wow.
That
Some
is
people.
Yeah.
I think people are just at home. They're bored. They're trying to think of things to be controversial. But all right.
Maybe.
So, all right.
Well, and that leads me on to another thing. The other thing that's making me furious at the moment is the idea that the arts are dispensable. What have people been doing during the pandemic?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What has been keeping them from going crazy?
Definitely.
Cats, cake, and the work of artists.
I love that. And I'm hoping you're talking about the musical Cats, of course.
Of course, yes.
Of course. So we've had a couple people ask about if you were going to be participating in the next Pirates film, since you've been in every other one. And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Pirates. So is that something you're allowed to discuss with us?
Yeah, sure. Given the fact I know nothing, I can discuss. Yeah.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, then you know the same amount as us. I guess one of the questions we wanted to ask was our mutual friend Chris Lewis told me I needed to ask about filming with Martin and what was the filming experience like during Pirates.
With Marty Kleber?
Yes, none other.
Well, hysterical, really. My favorite moment with Marty. Marty is a, he's he's a stuntman as well as being an actor. And no, we did not really drink rum on set. It's Disney, darling. Marty, although a real tough guy, has got a very delicate stomach. And we were down in Long Beach filming the swinging bone cage from film 2. And they really, it looked like a huge skate ramp in blue that they suspended us from a crane in this thing and swung us back and forth. And Marty started to get sick and he was going, I feel really sick. And I said, well, say something because you shouldn't suffer. So I said, look, Marty's sick. Can you let him down? And he was nearly on the verge of gagging. and he ran outside the cage and he was about to throw up, and somebody shouted, "Not on the blue screen!" Because obviously he thought they didn't want, when the film was finally finished, to have these wonderful walls with a big blob of Marty sick sticking on it. But we had great fun, and we remain great friends, and we see each other a lot at conventions, of course.
Oh, that's wonderful. And kind of a follow-up question to that is, now you have the opportunity to participate in video games. Like, you get to reprise your role in Kingdom Hearts. So what is that like for you, being able to be a playable video character? Not that many people can say that.
Well, great fun. Actually, that Kingdom, whatever it's called, what is it called?
Kingdom Hearts.
Kingdom Hearts
Yeah.
2 was one of the most difficult jobs I've ever had, because I've been in before and I've spent a few hours, doing a few lines. But I seem to have an endless amount of cue. It took days to do. It was extraordinary. I once games went beyond being able to play them on your Mac with 4 fingers and a mouse. I have never got to play them. But I do remember my son saying to me, he was really annoyed that I had done a character in Assassin's Creed 3, because he loved Assassin's Creed. And he said, "I'm just getting into it. And then I hear you. And it ruins the entire experience."
Oh, no.
Come on.
Well,
That would make it so much cooler for me.
Yeah, I agree. That's really awesome. So what do you think, Danica? Should we play our game?
Yes, I think we very much should.
Okay. So, Kevin, we have a game we're going to play. This is a game of Would You Rather. So there's no wrong answers. And if you want to elaborate on why you chose an answer, that's great. If not, we'll move right along. So, Danica, why don't you read the first one?
All right. Let's do it.
Who's written these?
We have.
Oh, good, okay.
So our first one is, would you rather be in Julie Taymor's next Shakespeare adaptation or be in a new Andrew Lloyd Webber musical?
Wow. I would like to be in a new Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, because it's one of my few unfulfilled ambitions on the stage. I have been in a couple of musicals on film, but I haven't quite convinced the world yet that they're missing out not having my beautiful voice in their musicals. So I would say, Julie, please remember me for next year. But just for now, can I do the Webber musical?
Do you have a favorite musical that you would like to do?
Well, I'm too old for all of the musicals that I would like to do now. My favorite musical was really the musical I did with my last year at drama school, was Guys and Dolls. And I just love that musical. I'm quite picky about musicals. I tend.
Yeah, same here.
There's a lot of very, in England we have Elaine Page does this thing about musicals on a Sunday on the radio. Elaine Page famously being, the first woman to sing Memory in Cats, and so much of it sounds very alike. Particularly from the 80s and 90s. I nearly did Gomez in the Addams Family in London, but eventually the musical didn't transfer to England. So that was a massive disappointment, because I spent a lot of time learning the songs. I have recorded about 12 songs for a musical that I did a sort of a platform performance for an audience in January, playing an old drunken, I wonder why, an old drunken country and western singer who dies in Cornwall. And but unfortunately, COVID put pay to that. So, yes, I'll go with Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Fabulous. All right, here's the next one. Would you rather be able to speak to animals or be able to speak every language?
I can do both.
Okay, fabulous.
So that's not an achievement. No, I think we can communicate with animals quite well, I think. I don't think you would ever be able to speak every language. I think your brain would go crazy. But I've traveled the world a lot, and I have a little working knowledge of about 5 languages. And because I wasn't taught, I don't retain it, but then, you know, within days of going back to Italy, say, I can pretty well get by.
Can you tell us what those other languages are?
American, by the way.
Yeah.
What was your question, Danica?
Can you tell us what the other languages are?
French, German, and Italian, and a little bit of Spanish. But I also have the great joy whenever I go to Russia or to East European countries with the Cyrillic alphabet. My dad was a great self-improver, and he decided when I was about 5 to order in installments an encyclopedia. And he got the first one and then couldn't afford to buy the rest. So we were the proud possessors of the Collins Encyclopedia of the letter R. So I'm a big expert on anything that begins with R. And one of them was Russian. So I learned the Cyrillic alphabet. So whenever I work in Russia, people always want to be with me because they go, where the hell are we? And I go, well, it says here that we're going to Gorky Park. Oh, it's Gorky Park. So I can't understand Russian, but I can at least read the signs. So
wow, that's impressive in itself.
Very good skill.
I love
Very
that.
good skill. All right, what's the next one?
Next one. Would you rather have to eat Marmite with every meal or have to eat black pudding with every meal?
I would be happy to eat both with every meal, but I would say on the whole, the black pudding.
I've never tried eating.
I actually prefer. It's something you don't have in America, and I can't bring it over because it's officially a beef extract, so you can't take it from one country to another. It's called Bovril, and it's the same as Marmite, but it's made of beef rather than yeast.
Interesting.
If you'd have brought that up, it would have been Bovril would be the answer.
Bovril. That was option C. So
Great. I'll go with a
We'll do that
Bovril.
for next time.
It goes Bovril, black pudding, Marmite.
beautiful.
Cool.
All right, here's the next one. Would you rather only be able to act in Tennessee Williams plays or only be able to act in George Bernard Shaw plays?
Tennessee Williams all the time. I've done a couple of George Bernard Shaw plays. I think he's a wonderful ideas man and a writer, and I am bored to death by his plays.
Okay.
I really can't stand them. I can't stand them. But as a man, he was very interesting. He was a terrible pedant. They need cutting. They're dull, and it's why they're not really done much anymore, I don't think. St. Joan is interminable. The thing I most remember about doing St. Joan at drama school is in the trial scene, the amount of second termers who passed out as guards on the side of the stage because it was so dull and interminable.
All right.
But Tennessee Williams is a wonderful playwright, and I would choose him every day.
Fabulous. All right.
All right. Our next one is, would you rather live in a treehouse or live in a hobbit hole?
That's really tricky because I have two fears in my life. One is heights and one is being in closed spaces.
So both kind of out.
So I'd live in the treehouse if it was a very small tree.
Low to the ground, like just a couple
Like a
steps.
foot
I'm
off the
not
ground.
going up to the bedroom. I'll sleep in the living room.
Fair enough. That works. All right. Here's the next one. Would you rather go to a pub with Sam and Castiel or go to a pub with Dean and Crowley?
Well, I've been in pubs with all of them.
Oh, okay.
Dean and Crowley, I presume, are yes, they're both supernatural characters, aren't they?
Yes.
Oh,
All of them. Mhm.
Who would? Oh, this is tricky. This is a tricky one. I think I'd go with Dean and Crowley because they're nearer to my age,
Hmm.
All
and
right.
they would understand my musical references, which maybe Sam and Castiel wouldn't.
All right. Good answer.
I like it.
All right.
All right. Next one. Would you rather be the lead in a reboot of Midsummer Murders, which I love, or be the next Doctor?
Well, I'll let you into a little secret.
You are the
I
next
was
Doctor.
in Midsummer Murders twice.
I know. I love that show.
When they were recasting the leading character, I got a message from my agent saying, oh God, I hope I don't offend anybody who's saying this, saying, we're thinking of recasting the leading character and you're on a short list of 7. We'd just like you to know you're on a short list of 7. And I said, would you do me a great favor and take me off that short list of 7 immediately? The idea of spending 7 months a year wandering around midsummer, asking people where we were on the night of the 5th fills me with horror. And I would really, you'd be doing me a favor. Please take me off the list. And they did. And they've got a really great guy to do it. So I'm very pleased for him. And I probably wouldn't have got it anyway. But I can't stand procedurals. I just can't stand them. Even being in them just wears me down a little bit. So I would love to be the next Doctor, but I think Peter has plugged the hole of a slightly older Doctor, and I don't think they'll be having an old white guy again. So we've had one, and that's probably enough for them now.
Fair. All right, here is the next one. Okay, this is the last one. Would you rather always talk like a pirate or dress like a pirate?
I think dress like a pirate. Talking like a pirate is tiring. Dressing like a pirate is easy, and you never have to wash your clothes. I do have that costume at home, and I cannot get the smell of salt out of it. I have worn it on a couple of charity gigs.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It is fun. It is fun, yeah. But no, definitely dress like a pirate. Some pirate, not me particularly, but a lot of pirates dress in a really, really cool way.
Comfortable.
I mean, look at Jack Sparrow, for heaven's sake.
Right? He's one pretty epic pirate. All right. Well, since we're at the end of our time, Kevin, is there any final thoughts that you want to leave us with here today?
No, but if you have any more questions to ask, please go ahead.
Are you sure?
I've still got some wine left.
Okay, let's do it. We have a lot of questions.
I'll go and top up. Hold on.
Okay, go ahead. So while he tops up, if you guys have any more questions that are watching live right now, feel free to type them in. We do have a bunch left, but we wanted to be respectful of Kevin's time. But let's circle back, Danica. Let's. All
right. Well, while he's filling up, let's talk about our upcoming guests. So this Thursday, we've got Gangrel, the wrestler. And then following Tuesday, we've got Josh Segarra and Hurricane Helms. The following Thursday, we have Matt Riley and Derek Frank. The Tuesday after that, we have Rashad Santiago and Rick Prince from Face Off. The following Thursday, we have Jeffrey Weissman. And then the only other confirmed we've got December 22nd, we've got Casey Jost. And then on the 29th, we've got Mr. Jonah Ray. Awesome. Those are upcomings.
Great guests.
Thank you.
We're very excited.
So,
we're always excited.
Let's see. Let's go with. Okay, we've asked that one. Okay, if you had the opportunity to get into the TARDIS and go anywhere in the world, anywhere and anytime, where would you like to go?
Well, as a fan of high-energy nuclear physics and cosmology, it's something I ask myself all the time. I'm not so sure the future is a viable choice because I think it would be too confusing. You know, Arthur C. Clarke once said that any technology sufficiently advanced would be indistinguishable from magic. And I think, you know, if I think about my own childhood, if I was projected to what I'm doing here right now, talking to you, I would be mystified by what the hell was going on with this sliver of what looks like glass and me talking to you at these distances. But obviously, as an actor, I rather fancy the not so distant past. One of my favorite books of the last few years was it's terrible. I can't remember. It's the date of Kennedy's assassination. It was the Stephen King book about the guy trying to go back and stop the Kennedy assassination. Something, you know, the idea. And there was a wonderful book years about people going back to the Middle Ages, and it's too difficult. I mean, you just get killed, you know, because any hint of magic or bizarreness, they string you up or put you in some bizarre torture device. The idea of going back to, say, the 20s or 30s or maybe the late 19th century, or, you know, I've been in Chicago a lot, maybe going back to the Chicago Fair, you know, which was an amazing time. There's a book I've been looking at about it. It was a serial killer going around. Or the
Yes.
1950s, going back to the day I was born. What did the world look like, you know, as I emerged into it? That sort of narrow period of the recent past seems to me really, really fascinating. One of the problems, of course, about going back in time, say to Shakespearean times, and one of the problems I always have in films doing that, is that if you go back more than 300 years, you wouldn't be able to understand a word anybody said. There was the great vowel shift of the late 1700s. In America, you wouldn't have been able to understand the Puritans. Their voices would be indecipherable to you. So there's that. And I presume that would be the case if you went in the future, you know, how things change.
Yeah, and if we would even communicate with language, who knows?
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah.
What do you think,
It's
Danica?
funny how things change. A friend of mine told me a great story the other day. He said he was somewhere and he had to leave, and he said to this young girl he was working with in her office, he said, "I've got to go, but I've got this letter. Would you mind putting it in the post box for me?" And she said, "I'd love to." And he said, "Why would you love to?" She said, "I've never posted a letter in my life." And you think,
How?
Yeah, I suppose it can, yeah. I suppose in the last 20 years, do people under the age of 25 post letters anymore? I don't think so.
I don't know,
Snail mail,
because we're not part of that demographic, so I guess we can't answer that.
I've mailed letters to the IRS. Yeah, I'm sending off my stuff. I promised the IRS I'm sending my stuff. So
Yeah, no, she really is.
I did. I swear. Okay, so Jude wants to know, what is the best piece of career advice you may have received from a fellow colleague or someone that you looked up to?
A couple, actually. I remember working with Robert Duvall on a thing called Stalin, and I was amazed at how he could mess around and be like any. I thought he might be really intense, you know, and I had this. My first shot in the show was a 1-to-1 with him in a corridor. We were conniving about politics. And he said to me, he said, "You look a little shocked." And I said, "Yeah, well, I just thought you might be a bit more method. You might be more difficult to work with." I'm being honest when I was young. And he said, "I'll tell you one thing, son. If you haven't got it in your pocket, you can't pull it out." And I thought, that's really fucking brilliant. That's about preparation, right?
Great.
You know you've got it. The other great piece of advice wasn't given to me directly, but I always quote it when I take acting classes, which I do a lot in the States and a lot in England. It was one of the very few things James Cagney ever said about his work, because he didn't speak about it very much. But he was asked what the job of acting was, and he said, "It's very simple. You walk into a room, you stand on your 2 feet, you look the other guy in the eye, and you tell the truth." And I thought, not me, that's pretty good. Apart from the fact, you know, it might sometimes be a woman. That's really good advice, I think.
That was a really good Cagney. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, shut up.
That's great.
Danica,
What do you say?
Oh, I'm waiting for this.
I
Danica,
love Cagney. He's my favorite.
Is he your favorite actor of all time?
Oh.
I mean,
that's a good choice.
You know, like, I think everybody has films they revisit all the time, and books, you know, and I try to leave it a good 2 years, and then I go and watch all the old Warner Brother movies again. Angels with Dirty Faces, they're probably going to be number 1. And
now I feel like I need to revisit.
20s. The Roaring Twenties is the greatest gangster film ever made. It's just wonderful.
Fair enough.
I love that. You know, you can get a scene between Humphrey Bogart and Jimmy Cagney when he's going, "Hey, no, look, don't." He's going like that, and he's going, "Yeah," and you just think, what 2 amazing, iconic characters doing a scene together. It's just wonderful.
Also, another thing we're learning about you is you're quite good with impressions.
I do like to do impressions, actually.
What do
which
you?
is why I did Bernard Ingham. Yeah.
What would you say is your best impression, or the one that you like that
Well,
gives you the most pleasure?
over in England, I've been for many years recreating the lost radio shows of a very famous radio comedian called Tony Hancock. And to put it in context for you, he was sort of at the same time and the same size and fame of Sid Caesar in America. I did him, and I've recently on the television done recreated some very famous lost television episodes of a show called Dad's Army, in which I had to impersonate both the actor and the performance he did of a character called Arthur Lowe. So I like that sort of hybrid thing of having to impersonate, bring something of your own to it, but also recreate another performer in a way that won't really piss everyone off. Do you know what I mean? Do it with love and respect.
Awesome.
Well, one of the other questions that I was interested in asking is, you've worked with a plethora of some of the most amazing actors. I mean, among Olivia Colman and Kenneth Branagh and Bill Nighy, and just like, so I was actually wondering, who among your castmates has been most like the characters that they play?
Oh, that's an interesting question. None of them, actually, because the people I know of my generation are all now character actors. So I think the joy is that you turn up and you find something different. I remember on the first day of the second pirate film, there was a knock on my door, and it was Bill Nighy, and I hadn't seen him for ages. And he was absolutely shocked, and he said, "Kevin," I said, "What?" He said, "I'm not getting a costume." I said, "How can you not be getting a costume?" He said, "I'm CGI." And he was absolutely furious. But of course, it worked out brilliantly because what he did and the way that that thing was just
incredible.
Amazing. And what an amazing performance that was. Who would have thought to have made Davy Jones Scottish? I wouldn't have. It wouldn't have ever occurred to me.
I also didn't know.
And Olivia's a wonderful character actor, and Ken is famously like Olivia. He's one for getting a different look and a different sound and a different voice and all of those things. I think particularly English character actors, they're very. Our joy in acting is to play different people, rather than perhaps a film star, or maybe, I don't want to generalize, but some American actors want to hone a specific thing that's employable and charming or whatever, and will change. But isn't it great when you do see people who are like that, who've honed something and then they do something completely different and it works, and it's just so surprising and enjoyable for everyone.
That's awesome. So, Kevin, this might be a question, and it's totally up to you how you want to answer, but what is the side of you that maybe the public really never gets to see? Like, is there a hobby that you have or something that, most people wouldn't know about you?
Well, the boring one of physics. I love physics and astronomy and things like that. But
that's far from boring.
Super cool.
I wouldn't say so. I try not to let them see me drunk too often. It's very bad for the image, and Disney don't like it. So I try not to do that.
Do you collect anything? Are you a collector of sorts?
Well, I referred earlier to that cabinet I've got. I do have some space memorabilia. I have John Young's pen from Gemini 10.
Oh, wow.
Or pencil, rather. It's a propelling pencil. And I have a flight plan from that. And I've got the stuff I bought down at the Neon Museum, and a collection of skulls, but not particularly. I mean, I'm not particularly attached to material objects. In fact, I know that I have kept a number of scripts from things that I've done, and I know a lot of actors are. Do you keep scripts as well? Yeah.
Oh, I have every script from pretty much everything I've worked on, and I'm a terrible hoarder of plays.
Oh, really?
Oh,
I only keep the ones that are really good, so I've got about 5 in 45 years. Yeah, I've got some scripts from way back in the 70s, when I started out. But I know actors who have, they've nicked stuff. Let's call it spade a spade. They've stolen stuff from the set to have at home, and I've never done that. It's a bit late now, I suppose. So.
Fair enough.
I have very few things from productions, but I have all of the scripts.
Right. It's a nice thing to have to look back, isn't it, and see.
Oh yeah, especially as a
Particularly to see
director.
what you wrote
I've got all
down
my
or
notes.
what you thought was important. Mine seemed to be full of a lot of caricatures of the other. I do like to draw, so I've got lots of caricatures of actors that I've worked with. So that's quite fun to look back at.
Well, I think maybe a fun question to kind of end this on is, obviously the world is different this year and everything's different. People are celebrating differently. But do you have any holiday traditions or anything that you like to do to kind of, be happy during the holidays?
No, I don't.
Fair.
I can't stand them.
Okay.
I'm a complete Scrooge about it all. But I was saying to a friend of mine the other day, look, I'm an actor. I didn't even notice anything had changed. I was still lying in bed watching movies when I'm out of work, and then drifting downstairs and having a cup of coffee and a sandwich. I didn't notice till about September that anything had changed.
Really?
I've been practicing for lockdown for about 40 years. So
Oh, fabulous.
no,
Great.
I'm fine with it all. I was very lucky that I don't know why, but I set up a little recording studio in my study just before all this happened. So I have been managing to, do some voiceovers and, some of them paid, some projects that people saying, well, should we do a little cartoon film? Will you provide the voice for that? So I've been managing to just about cover the wine bill and do a little bit of over-the-top character acting, yeah.
Has there been any film that you've watched in these past couple quarantine months that you would recommend?
Well,
Uh-oh.
actually, when it started, I suddenly had a desire to watch all the films that I'd loved as a kid. So I fully recommend The Love Bug, Herbie Goes Bananas, and Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo for any of you. It's great. I've now got round to trying to watch some more serious, influential films of the 60s. So I'm watching A Taste of Honey at the moment. A lot of my, comedy films. Definitely, if you're feeling blue, watch The Odd Couple.
Oh yes.
It's the funniest film that was ever made, and nobody will ever convince me that I'm wrong about that.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. This has been an absolute joy.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Your stories are wonderful. They're going to stick with me. And so I hope we get to do this again sometime, and maybe in person, hopefully
Great.
soon.
Yes, let's do that. I'll try to have a few more interesting experiences, so I've got some new stories by then.
I feel like you have plenty.
Oh, COVID.
Oh no. Well, on that note, guys, wear a mask and wash your hands.
Wear a mask. Keep socially distanced.
Very important,
Stay
guys.
home for the holidays. Drink with us.
Yes, exactly.
Cheers.
Well, cheers to all of you guys. We'll see you guys on Thursday.
And goodbye to all those guys who I knew, who I didn't see you all, but
That's so cool of
tuned in.
them.
Very nice to see you. Yeah.
Yes. It's a party.
Everybody.
All right, guys. We'll see you Thursday.